Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that touches so many lives. Alzheimer's disease. You hear the statistics right. Progressive, neurodegenerative, potentially affecting nearly 1 in 3 people over 85. It's daunting. And the conversation often feels overwhelming. Complex genetics, experimental drugs, demanding prevention plans. The fear around it is real. But what if a powerful tool against this cognitive decline wasn't some high-tech solution, but something, well, much simpler? Something like taking a daily walk.
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at a really significant study, a long-term one, from Mass General Brigham and the Harvard Aging Brain Study, or HABS. And this isn't just another exercise is good finding. They used objective measurements, tracking people for years, to pinpoint a specific low-impact activity level that seems to genuinely interfere with how Alzheimer's progresses biologically, even before symptoms show up.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack this research for you. How did they do it? What exactly did they find walking influences in the brain? And maybe most importantly, is there a specific step count, like a target number, that gives the best protection?
Precisely. And the headline finding is pretty remarkable. It suggests that getting as few as, say, 5,000 steps a day can significantly slow down the disease trajectory.
But here's the twist, the first really interesting part. The reason it seems to work goes against what many experts expected. It's not about tackling that first protein we always hear about, amyloid-β.
No, it seems the benefit comes from disrupting a different process involving the second key protein, tau.
Okay, so before we get to the results, let's lay the groundwork. Explain those two proteins for us, amyloid and tau.
Sure. So Alzheimer's pathology is often seen as this sequence involving two main proteins. First, you have amyloid-β. These are protein fragments that kind of clump together outside the brain cells, forming these things called plaques. Think of them as sticky buildup. And the general consensus is that this amyloid plaque buildup is the very first detectable sign someone's heading towards Alzheimer's, often years, even decades, before memory problems start.
So amyloid is like the initial trigger, but then there's tau. That's the one that actually causes the damage inside the neuron.
Exactly. Tau is normally crucial inside the neuron. It helps stabilize the microtubules. You can think of them as the internal transport network, like tiny railway tracks carrying nutrients within the cell. Tau keeps those tracks stable.
Okay, so it's essential normally. What goes wrong?
Well, the theory is that those amyloid plaques outside the cell create a toxic environment, maybe inflammation, oxidative stress. And this somehow causes the tau protein inside to change. It gets hyperphosphorylated, meaning too many phosphate groups get attached.
And that changes its shape and function.
Right. It can no longer stabilize those internal tracks. The transport system starts to break down. And even worse, these altered tau proteins then clump together inside the neuron, forming what we call neurofibrillary tangles, or just tau tangles.
And it's the buildup of those tangles, specifically in memory areas like the inferior temporal cortex, that really correlates with cognitive decline.
That's the connection, yes. Amyloid might start a fire, but it's the spread of tau tangles that seems to drive the cognitive symptoms and the progression of the disease.
And the researchers in this Harvard study could actually track both amyloid and tau over time. How did they do that?
They used PP scans, positron emission tomography. These scans use special tracers that bind specifically to either amyloid plaques or tau tangles, letting them visualize and measure how much of each protein was accumulating in the participants' brains over the years.
Okay, let's talk about the study design itself. Who were the participants?
They recruited 296 people from the ongoing Harvard Aging Brain Study. They were aged between 50 and 90 when they started. And this is really key. All of them were cognitively unimpaired at the baseline.
Meaning they didn't have noticeable memory or thinking problems yet.
Correct. They were in the preclinical stage. This focus is critical because the thinking is that interventions might be most effective before significant damage and symptoms appear. You're trying to delay or prevent the onset.
And how did they measure the walking? This wasn't just asking people how much they walked, right?
No, and that's a huge strength. They used objective data. Participants wore a pedometer, a simple step counter, for 7 days straight at the beginning of the study.
So they got a reliable average daily step count for each person, avoiding that tendency we all have to overestimate our activity levels.
Exactly. It avoids recall bias. And interestingly, the average across the group was about 5,700 steps per day, which actually falls right into that moderate category we'll discuss later.
And this wasn't just a quick snapshot study. How long did they follow these people?
This is another major strength of longevity. They tracked participants for up to 14 years, with the median follow-up being 9 years. That kind of long-term data is quite rare and incredibly valuable for looking at slow, age-related changes like Alzheimer's progression.
Wow, that's a serious commitment. And alongside the brain scans and step counts, they tracked cognitive function.
Yes, annually. They used detailed tests. One was the preclinical Alzheimer's Cognitive Composite 5, or PACC5. It's designed to pick up very subtle, early changes in memory and thinking that often precede dementia.
So that catches the initial cognitive slips. What about actual daily functioning?
For that, they used the Clinical Dementia Rating Sum of Boxes, or CDR-SOB. This measures how well someone is managing everyday life, things like personal care, handling finances, engaging with the community.
Okay, so PACC5 for the thinking ability, CDR-SOB for the real-world function.
Got it.
So you've got objective steps, objective brain scans for amyloid and tau, and careful tracking of both cognitive and functional decline over nearly a decade. It's a very robust setup, even for an observational study. All right, let's get to the results. What happened when they analyzed all this data? You mentioned a surprise regarding amyloid.
Yes. So the prevailing idea for a long time, the amyloid cascade hypothesis, basically suggested that if you reduce amyloid plaques, you should slow the disease. So many would have predicted that physical activity helps by clearing amyloid.
Makes sense. Did it?
It did not. The study found absolutely no link between the baseline step counts, how much people walked, and the amount of amyloid plaque they had at the start, or how quickly it built up over time.
Really? So whether someone walked 3,000 steps or 8,000 steps, their rate of amyloid accumulation was basically the same?
That's what the data showed. Walking didn't seem to touch the amyloid buildup process itself.
Huh. So if it's not affecting the amyloid, which we thought was the primary trigger, how is walking protective? Does this change how we should think about the disease process?
It certainly points towards a different mechanism of action for physical activity. The benefit wasn't related to amyloid. It was significantly associated with the other protein, tau.
Ah, okay. So what did they find regarding tau?
They found that higher physical activity, more steps per day, was linked to slower accumulation of tau tangles, specifically in that critical inferior temporal cortex region involved in memory.
So walking didn't stop the initial spark, amyloid, but it seemed to dampen the spread of the fire, tau.
That's a good analogy. And importantly, this protective effect against tau buildup and the subsequent cognitive decline was strongest in the people who already had high levels of amyloid at the start of the study.
So for the people who were already on that Alzheimer's path, judging by their amyloid levels, walking made the biggest difference in slowing down the tau progression and cognitive symptoms.
Exactly. It suggests that physical activity is particularly beneficial for those most at risk, those already showing the initial signs of Alzheimer's pathology in their brains.
Okay, let's get practical. The study looked at different levels of walking. Can you break down those categories and what they found about the dose needed?
Sure. They divided people into 4 groups based on their average daily steps. Inactive was 3,000 steps or fewer. Low activity was 3,001 to 5,000 steps. Moderate activity was 5,001 to 7,500 steps. And active was over 7,500 steps per day.
And what was the relationship between these levels and the benefits? Was it just more is always better?
Not exactly. They found what's called a curvilinear relationship. The biggest jump in protective benefits happened when people moved from being inactive to just the low activity group.
So just getting off the couch and hitting that 3,000 to 5,000 steps a day mark already provides a really significant boost compared to doing very little.
The huge boost, yes.
Yeah.
That's a really encouraging message for sedentary individuals. But then the benefits continued to increase into the moderate activity group, the 5,000 to 7,500 step range.
And what happened after that? Did going above 7,500 steps into the active group add even more protection against the Alzheimer's pathology?
This is the key finding regarding the dose. The protective effect seemed to plateau around that moderate level. The active group, walking over 7,500 steps, didn't show a statistically significant additional benefit compared to the moderate group, specifically in terms of slowing tau accumulation and cognitive decline related to Alzheimer's pathology.
That's really interesting. So that popular 10,000 step goal might be great for general health, but for the specific brain protective effect against Alzheimer's progression, hitting somewhere between 5,000 and 7,500 steps seems to capture the maximum benefit.
That's what this data suggests. It makes the goal feel much more attainable for many people, especially older adults, doesn't it? It's not about extreme fitness. It's about consistent, moderate movement.
Let's quantify that benefit. How much slower was the decline for people hitting that moderate activity level?
Okay, look at the highest risk group, those who were inactive. and had high amyloid levels at the start. Compared to them, the people who achieved moderate activity,
Right.
7,500 steps, saw their rate of cognitive decline, measured by that PAS-CC5 score, reduced by 54% over the 9-year median follow-up.
54%. That sounds like a massive difference in real-world terms.
It translates into significant extra time. The researchers estimated timelines. The inactive high amyloid group was projected to cross the threshold into noticeable cognitive impairment in about 6.5 years.
Okay. And the moderate activity group.
The projection. They delayed reaching that same threshold until about 13.6 years.
Wow. So over 7 years longer before hitting that impairment mark, just from achieving that moderate step count.
Yes, over 7 additional years of potentially preserved cognitive function, maintaining independence, managing daily life. It's a profound difference.
And did they see a similar benefit for functional decline, like managing daily tasks?
They did. Using the CDR-SOB scores, the inactive group hit the threshold for meaningful functional decline in about 7.1 years. The moderate activity group pushed that out to 11.9 years.
So nearly 5 extra years of functional independence.
Almost 5 years, yeah. Tied to that achievable daily walking goal, it really underscores the potential impact of this simple intervention.
All right, this brings us to the mechanism. How exactly is walking doing this? If it's not stopping amyloid, how is it slowing down tau and delaying decline?
This is where the study gets really insightful. They used a statistical technique called moderated mediation analysis. Essentially, they asked, why does walking lead to slower cognitive decline? What's the intermediate step?
And the answer was tau.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Their analysis showed that the link between higher physical activity and slower cognitive decline was almost entirely explained. 84% mediated was the figure by the fact that walking slowed down the accumulation of tau protein.
84%. So most of the cognitive benefit comes specifically from interfering with that tau cascade.
Correct. It strongly suggests walking's primary protective mechanism on cognition, in the context of Alzheimer's pathology, is through modulating tau. It's like the walking is helping the neurons resist the toxic downstream effects triggered by the amyloid.
Like that damage control idea you mentioned earlier. The amyloid match is lit, but walking makes the internal structures, tau, less flammable.
That's a good way to put it. It's mitigating the response to the initial insult.
But how? What could walking be doing biologically to make tau less problematic? Does it reduce the inflammation that amyloid causes?
That's highly likely, though not measured directly here. We know moderate exercise acts as an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant systemically. Since inflammation and oxidative stress are thought to drive tau hyperphosphorylation, reducing that background noise could make tau less likely to misbehave, even with amyloid present. It's like calming the environment around the neurons.
Okay, so tau mediation explains about 84% of the cognitive benefit. But you mentioned earlier that for functional decline, the ability to do daily tasks, tau only explained about 40% of the benefit from walking. So if slowing tau is the main reason walking preserves thinking, what else is walking doing to help people stay independent longer? CDR-SOB. What explains the other 60% of that functional benefit?
That suggests walking provides benefits beyond just tackling the specific Alzheimer's pathology. It likely boosts what we call functional reserve through more general systemic effects.
Like what?
Well, the most obvious one is improved vascular fitness. Better heart and lung function means better blood flow to the brain.
Ah, so keeping the delivery system healthy.
Exactly. Alzheimer's often involves vascular problems, too. Better circulation means more oxygen and nutrients get to brain cells, helping them function better and resist damage longer, even if some pathology is present.
So a healthier neuron overall can compensate for longer? That makes sense. It's like providing better support.
Precisely. And then there are the molecular factors.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise is known to boost beneficial molecules in the brain.
Like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Yes, BDNF is a key one, often called miracle grow for the brain. It supports neuron survival, growth, and communication synaptic plasticity. More walking likely means more BDNF, helping maintain and repair neural connections.
The study also mentioned VEGF-A and irisin. What roles might they play?
VEGF-A promotes the growth of blood vessels, reinforcing that vascular benefit, keeping the brain's plumbing healthy. And irisin is fascinating. It's released from muscle during exercise, travels to the brain, and seems to have direct protective effects against both amyloid and tau toxicity, based on other research. It might help steer amyloid away from forming plaques and potentially interfere with tau modification.
So it's really a multi-pronged defense system set in motion by walking. You've got the direct effect on slowing tau, the general improvement in brain blood flow and health, and then these helpful molecules like BDNF and irisin cleaning up and supporting resilience.
It appears that way, yes. Combination of specific anti-pathology effects and general brain health promotion.
Now, as with any study, we need to talk about limitations. The researchers themselves pointed these out. What are the key things to keep in mind?
Absolutely. The biggest one is that this was an observational study. They observed links, but they didn't randomly assign people to walk or not walk. That means we can't be 100% certain about cause and effect like you can with a randomized controlled trial, or RCT.
So there's the possibility of reverse causality. Maybe people who were already healthier or in the very earliest stages of brain decline simply walked less to begin with.
That's always a consideration in observational research. However, the HABS team did try to account for this. They ran sensitivity analyses, for instance, removing people who developed cognitive impairment very early on. This strengthens the case that walking was likely the cause, not just a consequence, but an RCT would be needed for definitive proof.
What about how they measured walking? It was just for 7 days at the start, right?
Yes, that's another limitation. It's a snapshot. It doesn't capture lifetime activity habits or changes over the 9+ years of follow-up. And it only measured steps, not swimming, cycling, strength training, or the intensity of the walking.
So other types of exercise could also be beneficial, maybe in different ways.
Potentially, yes. Especially for functional aspects like strength and balance, which also contribute to independence. Future research using maybe continuous monitoring could explore this more.
And the participants themselves, they were a specific group.
They were mostly highly educated, non-Hispanic, white individuals, and without major pre-existing vascular disease. So we need to be cautious about generalizing these exact percentages and timelines to absolutely everyone, particularly more diverse populations or those with more complex health issues.
But the underlying biology, the tau connection, the vascular benefits, those are likely relevant more broadly.
Very likely, yes. The fundamental mechanisms are probably universal, even if the magnitude of the effect varies somewhat between different groups.
Okay, so acknowledging those limitations, what are the big takeaways here? What does this mean for public health and for individuals?
I think the main message is incredibly positive and practical. It gives us a clear, achievable target. Aiming for that 5,000 to 7,500 steps per day range seems to offer substantial protection against the progression of Alzheimer's-related changes, especially for those at higher risk. It shifts physical activity from being a vague recommendation to a specific evidence-based therapeutic target for brain health, particularly in older adults who might find higher goals intimidating.
And for future research, it sounds like this points towards specific types of clinical trials.
Definitely. The researchers suggest that future trials testing physical activity interventions should probably focus on people who are currently sedentary and have high amyloid levels. That's the group where this study showed the biggest potential benefit.
Targeting the intervention where it's most likely to work makes sense. Maybe even combining walking programs with other therapies down the line.
That's a possibility, yes. Perhaps combining physical activity with, say, anti-amyloid drugs could offer a synergistic effect, tackling the pathology from multiple angles.
So this deep dive really highlights that sometimes powerful tools against complex diseases aren't necessarily the most technologically advanced ones.
It really does. It shows that a fundamental biological input, simple, moderate movement, can have a profound impact on a devastating neurodegenerative process.
And the key isn't necessarily pushing for extreme fitness, but achieving and maintaining that consistent, moderate level of activity. Sufficiency over intensity, perhaps?
That seems to be the story here for this specific outcome. Consistency in moderate movement is key.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. If just a daily walk can have this kind of impact on something as complex as the tau cascade in Alzheimer's disease, what other simple everyday choices might be quietly working behind the scenes to protect our health and resilience as we age? Something to think about on your next walk.
A great point to ponder.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this information empowers you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.